good afternoon. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that introduction, which I didn't understand a word of, but I'm sure it was a very pleasant introduction. It's delightful to be here in Sofia. I was in Bucharest earlier in the week, and now Sofia, so I think I'll carry on my travels through the region. It's good to be here. I think I was here a few years ago, but my memories of Sofia go back to 1980 when I spent a couple of weeks here, because I am really old, as you can tell, and it was probably a very different place in 1980, but it's really good to be here. I'm what's called the Vice President for Europe, whatever that means, so I'm based in Brussels. Brussels is a little town in Belgium. Belgium is a little country in Europe, so you might have heard of it. I sort of head up the ICANN operations in Brussels. As most of you know, ICANN is based in Los Angeles, which is a little town in the United States. But Brussels is our main sort of European hub, and it's going to become more important as I'll go on. I've only been in ICANN since March, so I don't know much, so probably most of you know a lot more about ICANN than I do. Vinny, of course, who spoke to you this morning, is the real expert, because not only does he know about ICANN, but he can speak Bulgarian and lots of other languages as well. I can speak English on a good day, so that's quite an advantage, and I'm learning American as well. So, and I'll, yeah, oh right. Yeah, sorry, yeah. Right. Okay, well, I'm going to talk a bit about ICANN to give you an update of what's going on. This is a slide which I quite like. I've never really understood what it means, but and to an audience as intelligent and educated and aware as you, it doesn't really need to be shown. But I think this slide has a real relevance, because I'm going to show this slide at the beginning of the wicket. Well, actually I won't, because they probably won't let me. But this slide should be shown to all the delegations at the beginning of the wicket. And that is because what we try to do on the internet...
You need a mic, you need a microphone.
No, it's all right, I won't walk across. Because what we obviously try and do on the internet is connect one user to the other user. And I think this slide should be shown right at the beginning of the conference in Dubai, because so many of the proposals being tabled will do exactly the opposite. They'll balkanize the internet. They'll create small internets. They'll destabilize the very open internet that many of you in .bg and other domains have strived for all over these years. So I think it's a relevant slide in that context. Of course, the domain names have grown from being almost 100% US to almost 100% international, in the sense that as we go forward, the next billion users are not going to be in the US, but they're going to be in India, China, and other parts of the globe. So this is the real message, I suppose, I will give today, is one of ICANN developing and changing, being more global, being more international in its very understanding, at its very core of its operations. So this is what I'll go over, a new season. GTLDs, I'll say a bit about them. I think they're called generic top-level domains or something. I'll talk a bit about the RAA, which I think is the Royal Institute, no, something to do with arts or something, isn't it? Royal, no, Academy of Arts. Global issues, and then discussion, which is probably more important. So a new season. Now, I know Vinny said something about this morning, but it's on my slide, so I have the right to say something this afternoon. What does a new season mean? We have a new chief executive, but then lots of organisations have new chief executives. A new chief executive in its own doesn't necessarily mean a change of direction, although it can do. But in ICANN's case, it is meaning a change of direction. It's meaning a change in the very ethos of the organisation. Because Fadi Chahadi has come in and he says, look, ICANN needs to do two things. It needs to be excellent, and it needs to globalize. It needs to shift the center of gravity, and we'll come on to that in a minute. So it's a new approach. It's listening, engaging, responding, internal excellence, and external accountability. That's what the new season is all about. So essentially, there's 4 key objectives in our new business plan. Like any organisation, we have to have business plans. I was in government for far too long, and then I thought, joining ICANN, I thought, well, it'll be an internet organisation. I'll get away from business plans. There won't be anything like that. You know, we'll all wear T-shirts. I'm not very good at wearing T-shirts, but and we'll all go around conferences and speak, and we won't worry about business plans and financial accounting. I was wrong. We have a very strict business plan in ICANN. I'm not very good at it because I can't read spreadsheets, but essentially it comes down to 4 key objectives for the core of the organisation. Affirmation of purpose, and I'll go over these briefly. Operational excellence, internationalisation, and that's spelt with a Z. It should be spelt with an S, I know, but Apple doesn't like S's for some reason. And the multi-stakeholder model evolution. That's a mouthful. So affirmation of purpose. And here, what this breaks down to is knowing where we are, knowing who we are and where we fit. Knowing as an organisation, as a community, where we're going. Knowing the role that ICANN has in its wider sense. Not being afraid to legitimise our role or fight for our mission. And this is very important. Yes, we have to have operational excellence, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But we can't remain in our bunker. We can't just put things in the root zone file, organise GTLDs, and say we've done our job and we'll let everyone else, do the rest. ICANN has to be seen to be legitimate. We have to be in the community. We have to respond to what the community needs of us. And we have to fight for our mission. We have to fight for an open, interoperable and secure internet, which is very relevant to the purpose that I started off on. And we need to stand tall with our internet partners and the wider community. And it's so good that I've been followed by a much more erudite and educated gentleman. Olivier is speaking to you later about the multi-stakeholder approach and what he brings to the table, which is so important. I'm just a member of staff. Operations excellent. Of course, any organisation has to be excellent, and ICANN has to do the job properly. Users, country code domains, generic top-level domain, registrars, registries, internet service providers, all have to have confidence in the ICANN model, have to have confidence that ICANN is going to perform. And of course, there have been problems with the GTLD process, the glitches, or whatever they were called, in the earlier parts of the year. So we have to make no more mistakes. We've got a GTLD process which is rolling out. There's still a long way to go before the new names are put into the root. But during that process, we have to have an excellent decisions, an excellent process in place. We have to come to the right decisions on the registry accreditation agreement, the right balance between the needs and the aspirations of law enforcement and the needs of the registries and the needs of the individual in terms of their privacy and the protection of their data. We have to come to the right decisions on what goes in the WHOIS database and how it's used. And we have to have an effective and efficient IANA function. Whether you're a country code domain registry, whether you're a generic registry, you have to have confidence, you have to have a level of assurity, I would say, that the changes in the IANA function are going to be made to your satisfaction and within the time frames for your own operations. And we can also discuss later, possibly in terms of IANA, how the IANA function itself is going to evolve in the next few years, how the relationship with the US in terms of the IANA function is going to evolve and adapt. We're serious about internationalization. It's not just a buzzword. And the difference here, and some of you were at Toronto, and apologies for those that were at Toronto, because you probably heard all this sort of message before, and some of you will have heard it too many times. But the difference in this approach to internationalisation is that we're not just opening offices. Yes, we are going to open more offices in more places, but it's a whole change of the ethos of ICANN. It's moving responsibility out of Los Angeles and moving the centre of gravity eastwards. Now, where it lands, I don't know, in the Pacific Ocean somewhere, or in the Atlantic Ocean, or wherever, or somewhere over Brussels. But essentially, it's moving the whole organisation in an easterly direction. And it's not just, as I say, it's not just a case of putting sales offices in other countries and all those salesmen reporting back to base. It's more of a globalisation, it's more of a whole change in the culture of the organisation. And resources are going to be deployed in new areas. And this is something, again, that we need to discuss and we need to engage with the community on. The global matrix. Now this again is sort of management speak, isn't it? So we now, in ICANN, have a management matrix. It's exciting. I could even get enthusiastic about management matrices on a good day. Probably not on a Thursday, but on a Monday, I could get excited about it. But it's a new approach to ICANN management. And essentially what it is ensuring that each region, each ICANN region, and you know there's various regions, and the regions map the regional internet registry regions, each ICANN region having the resources from all the parts of the organisation that it needs. So for instance, in Brussels, in the European region, we will have people in Brussels dealing with the new generic top-level domains. We will have lawyers in Brussels. We'll have HR people in Brussels. We'll have compliance officers in Brussels. We'll have people serving the community in a localised way. And the same will be for Beijing and India and other parts of the Middle East and in other parts of the world. In other words, we will staff the regions with the people needed to be able to serve the community, whether they're registrars, whether they're registries, whether they're internet service providers, whether they're users, etc. We're going to put the resources where the people are. This is already happening. As I say, in Brussels, we've got functions going into Brussels. And we need to have the resources where the market will be. I think Veni mentioned this morning 2 new hires for ICANN that Fadi Jihadi made when he came in September. Sally Casterton, who's in charge of stakeholder relations and communication. She's based in the UK and Brussels, so there we are. She's already over this part of the world, so to speak. And Tariq Kamal, Dr. Tariq Kamal, the former Egyptian communication minister, who's based in Brussels and looks after governmental relations. So already we're seeing this shift of gravity away from LA. The multi-stakeholder model, I'm not going to talk much about the multi-stakeholder model and the evolution, as we call it, of the multi-stakeholder model. I'm sure Olivier will say a lot more about it in a much better way. But I think it's important for us to look at this chart occasionally, just to understand where we all fit in this ICANN community. Because this ICANN community, as many of you know, is quite a complex and quite a wide community, and everyone has a space in this community. And over the next few years, one of the things that Fadi Jihadi wants to do is refine the multi-stakeholder approach in ICANN to make it work better. I mean, clearly over the years, some parts of the organisation say that they don't, if you like, have as much say as other parts of the organisation. And in Toronto, some of you will have heard him speak about the multi-equal stakeholder approach, which is a dreadful phrase, isn't it? I shouldn't say that about a phrase my boss uses, but I don't like the wording multi-equal stakeholder approach. It doesn't sound very grammatical. an English person, but it has the right sense. In other words, that stakeholders across the community, whether they're governments, whether they're users, whether they're registrars, whether they're registries, whether they're standards organisations, should have some locus, should feel they all belong in the same sort of way. New GTLDs, just a couple of points on this. On track, quite amazingly, there's only been a handful of withdrawn applications. The evaluations are well underway. This process called the draw, as you know, is scheduled for later in December. I think tomorrow it's going to be announced when it's going to take place, and the process by which you have to enter it. I think that's being announced tomorrow. Early warning being provided by the GAC. This is the Government Advisory Committee. As you know, governments have an ability within the GAC structure to, if you like, raise early warnings on certain names, and this is taking place. Just because they raise an early warning on a name does not mean to say that that name won't go into the root. There's been objections on many names, which I'm sure there won't be a GAC consensus on, because there's two stages that governments have in this process in terms of new generic top-level domains. They have the ability to make an early warning, and then they have the ability with their colleagues in the Government Affairs Committee to come to a consensus on whether they should object to a certain name. And of course, there's not necessarily a correlation between early warning and final decisions on objections. Further work is going ahead on establishing the trademark clearinghouse. Some of you might have read the announcement in the last few days. Fadi Chahadi personally has taken charge of a cross-community group to try and solve the terms of reference, if you like, for the establishment of the trademark clearinghouse. A lot of work is going on that, and a meeting is taking place as we speak in Los Angeles on that. And good news on the capacity, so to speak, the ability of putting names into the root. It looks like some of the constraints which we thought might have been there probably won't be there, which might allow a speedier deployment through 2013. Negotiations on the registry accreditation agreement have been very difficult indeed. This is the updating of the registry accreditation agreement. This is all registrars that handle generic names have to comply with the agreement, and there's various discussions underway in terms of, as I said before, the balance between the way that the registrars operate, the information that they gain from, the information that they gain from the people registering the names. And there are some remaining issues that have still got to be sorted. The issue of data points. This is whether you should be demanding both an email and a phone number from your registrants, or either. Verification timing, whether you should, in effect, every year go back to the registrant and check that their personal details or their company details are the same, or whether you should do it only based on the triggering of some sort of complaint or address or complaint or event or something like that. Data retention, when the registrant no longer is a registrant, when they if you like, their webs or their name, they don't need their name anymore, how long should you keep that data? And these are all issues which are of immense importance to the community. They're important issues in terms of many countries. Many countries have national legislation, or in the case of Europe, of course, Bulgaria, part of the EU 27, has European legislation which touches on these issues. So there's some real thought going on there, but this again is one of the issues that Fadi Chahadi has said that he wants a closure of, that he wants to be able to bring this to a head. And so certainly there's hoping to be some sort of breakthrough by the end of the year.
Global issues. Let me finish on the global issues. So, as I said earlier, ICANN is part of the internet governance community. It's part of the internet governance ecosystem. It doesn't own the internet, it doesn't have a complete locus on the internet in any sense at all. It is one of the many parties that go to make up the internet ecosystem, along with the IETF, along with the Internet Society, of course. And the Internet Society, where would we be without them in many respects? And of course the regional internet registries as well, that have an integral part of the process. We all go to make up this ecosystem, and we all have a mission, if you like, together to maintain internet governance in the way that it is, to maintain the internet governance model that we all signed up to after the WSIS process in 2005, and which is now clearly under threat. So our mission, if you like, certainly within ICANN, is to ensure that the internet remains open, interoperable and secure. And as we go through the next few years, we're challenged. We're challenged in the sense of the wicket, and no doubt you've had discussion on that already, and no doubt we could talk for length about the World Conference on International Telecommunications, which is taking place in Dubai. And then later next year in May, we have the World Telecommunications Policy Forum, which is on internet governance. And again, from that, there could be opinions, there could be resolutions, there could be recommendations, which again affect the openness, the interoperability, and the security of the internet, and indeed the multi-stakeholder approach. And almost even more important is the WSIS plus 10. And let me just say a couple of words on WSIS plus 10, because although you've read an awful lot about the wicket and what's going to happen in Dubai, I guess you won't have read so much about wicket plus 10. In New York today, they are discussing a G77 and China resolution on ICT for development, which calls for a full preparatory process for the WSIS plus 10 review. Now, what does this mean? What this essentially means is that the G77 countries plus China are calling for another PrepCon. And for those of you that are around in 2003 and 2005, this would essentially mean that an intergovernmental committee, not stakeholders, not registrars, not registries, nothing to do with CCTLDs. Yes, they'll be discussing whether there should be CCTLDs in the future. Nothing to do with GTLDs. Yes, they'll be discussing whether there should be GTLDs in the future. It will be a member state committee, it will be a member state preparatory process that will meet between perhaps the end of this year and 2015 to review the Tunis agenda. This is absolutely fundamental. Now, it's very unlikely, I would have thought, that the United Nations in the next few days, in the next few weeks, will agree to this. But this is the proposal on the table. And this proposal will be on the table as it is now this year. It will be on the table next year as well. It's a fundamental challenge to the multi-stakeholder approach. The idea would be that you have a PrepCon, and during that PrepCon, you change the Tunis agenda so that the internet doesn't, so that effectively the governance of the internet goes back to a multilateral approach as has been proposed in the UN over the last couple of years. So it's an important process going on in New York, and a very busy agenda indeed. Finally, why is wicket of concern? Well, as I've said, it's of concern, I think, because of the openness. I won't talk about security or interoperability, but the openness of the internet, I think, is one of those fundamental beliefs, if you like, that many of us have, whether we've been in government, whether we've been in civil society, whether we've been in business. We've done this work because we have some sort of notion that the internet should be open, that we have some sort of notion that we all bring something to the internet, whatever our skills, whatever our background, whatever our culture, wherever we come from, we bring something to the internet. And clearly, the threats to the internet through the WCIT process are potentially significant. ETNO, the European Telecommunication Network Operators, put forward proposals which were put forward in good faith, which were put forward in their view to recognise the challenge that telecommunication operators had in terms of investment, in terms of access to broadband services. And those proposals are being used by some, if you like, to justify an approach which could completely change the whole character of the internet. So a lot to play for in Dubai, and I'm not going to go through the proposals. Many of you are far more knowledgeable than me about proposals. The Secretary General has said that the WCIT is not the place to discuss internet governance. That's from the WTPF in May. But then we see the Russian proposal that's been circulated in the last day or so does exactly that. It calls for governmental control of the distribution of addresses, governmental control for the distribution of numbering. Will we have one world, one internet? Thank you, and very happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hickson. Have a question?
Bernard from CORE. I'm of course happy to hear all the commitments that we have thanks to Fadi about transparency and openness and listening and so on. And bottom-up process, this is very important. But the first acts that I've seen that actually really had a lot of effect by Fadi were the absolute opposite. So the first thing was to say the draw is fair. Of course it is unfair, but there's no point in pretending that black is white. It is the most horrible thing ICANN has ever done. But here comes the new CEO and says that's the right thing to do. But at least he said we're going to do a 30-day comment period. Now the 30-day comment period just ended. Now ICANN has listened, but they just announced yesterday what they're doing. We don't care what's being said. That's what we're going to do. We're going to announce the draw. That's what we've been doing. That we decided there's not going to be any change. And then we've got the trademark clearinghouse. Bottom up. That's nice. I'm in a mailing list about technical discussions. There was no news. I learned today that there is a meeting by some people who have been selected top down to discuss what the trademark and the clearinghouse is going to look like. These are things. These are two biggies. There's other ones, of course, that affect just local communities. And if you look at the IDNs, that's an old one, the one specifically related to here. The fact that the Bulgarian IDN CCFT is still held up, of course, is related to a couple of ICANN processes. And again here, news comes, no, we're not changing, we're looking at it, we don't need to explain. So how can we actually make sure that the reactions of ICANN do take into account what is being said?
Well, legitimate points, and clearly I think we'll have to wait until we see what the details of the draw are and how the actual details respond to the comments from the community. Until tomorrow, I think it's going to be announced tomorrow. I have no knowledge of what those details are, but clearly, as you say, there has been a consultation process, and hopefully some of the feedback from that consultation will be taken into account. On the trademark clearinghouse, I think what's happened there is clear in that there's been a decision that heads need to be banged together. It needs to be a process whereby, not your head necessarily, but clearly, for the sake of the confidence of the whole GTLG process, the trademark clearinghouse is an important component of it, and therefore there has to be a way of resolving what takes place and how it's organised and how it's run and how people have redress and how people have access to it. And that's what's being discussed. And as I understand it, the group that's being brought together to discuss it is representative of the community. There's various...
I don't really know who's inside. The usual suspects. But let's say in ICANN the same mistake was made with numerous top-down selected committees, all of which came to no results. So I hope we don't do that again.
Well, I am confident. I think that that this process will lead to an output that will be seen to be acceptable to all. I mean, I don't know the names of every single individual in the group. They were all meeting in Brussels the other week, so I saw them in the big conference room we had in Brussels. But clearly, there's quite a number of people representing different parts of the community. On .bg, because I think this is relevant to this audience. So I'm not an expert on .bg, but it was before my time. But I'm aware that both .bg in script, and of course .eu in Greek script were both two names, and there were others as well that didn't, that didn't get through the IDN process. And as I understand it, what's now taking place in a fairly rapid way, we understand, is a process whereby some sort of appeals.
Because I've been involved in many ways since the beginning, even before the beginning with this. So the problem with .bg is that under the fast track, all the options were explored. The government has choice either to move with the fast track with another POD, another string, or to wait until the process is under the normal track and then apply again for .bg. And apparently, based on the experience from the current situation, there will be an appealing process and some other ways of dealing with such issues when there is a rejection and the applicant doesn't know what to do. But it's a different issue for the other domains which did not pass the evaluation. And there was a roundtable in San Francisco, I believe, at the ICANN meeting, where Lyman spoke in length, and we had I don't remember, Ilya could remind me, but we had probably 3 roundtables in Bulgaria on this issue with the government, and maybe half a dozen conference calls again with the government and everyone else. And last year, Rod Beckstrom, when he was in Bulgaria, met with the deputy minister and with the president, and they raised the same question. So basically, all the options that we could provide to the local community, to the applicant, which is the Ministry of Communications, were explored.
Well, that is the expert, but I can give you a commitment that the .bg name, along with the .eu name, will go into this appeals process, because I have it on good authority.
If they want it.
If the applicant wants it, of course, but it will go into this appeals process, and that's what's being organised at the moment. One other thing I didn't mention, and I can come back to it if anyone is interested, and that's the issue of international governmental organisations and the work that's being taken forward there. Again, in response to concerns from the community and in particular governments, some protection at the second level for international governmental organisations, whether it's the OECD or the UN or WIPO or whatever, looks like it will be coming into effect at some point.
Hi, Nigel.
Afternoon, sir. Do you want to come here and I'll ask you a question?
No, I think this is going to work fine. More of a comment, actually. First of all, on the last point you made, you might be interested to know that the GNSO Council, sitting in session an hour ago, voted against the recommendations from the drafting team to protect IOC, RC marks at the second level. So that is not going to happen immediately. It might happen, as you say, but it's not going to happen today. And I just wanted to go back to the point about the Trademark Clearinghouse discussions, because I think Werner actually let you off lightly on that point.
He's a very nice.
He was much too nice to you, and I'll try and be not as nice. But I think, as a comment, it's clear that this is, as you said, an attempt to solve the problem. That's very clear, and there's a decision by Fadi to try and go into these discussions on implementation details and try and solve the problem. Now, I think everyone is probably positive on that score. But once you, in that discussion, include possible policy reviews, and the IPCBC recommendations look like policy reviews to me, from what came out of the community on those RPMs, then if you do so in closed meetings that are by invitation only, which the Brussels and Los Angeles meetings are, you run the risk of making it look like you're not being transparent. So I think you have to be careful what you say on those two meetings. If the, you know, we'll see what the Los Angeles meeting is today. We'll see what happens, what comes out of it. I don't. In my understanding, I wasn't there. My understanding is that in the Brussels meeting there was no policy talk. But if there is policy talk, then I think we're beginning to get on shaky ground.
Well, I think point taken exactly. So I think what you're saying is that if it verges into an area where policy advice is given, then it would need to go back through some sort of loop again if there was any sort of...
I think we have time just for one more question. So.
No, rather an observation, just for everyone who have probably missed the ICANN meetings. That's exactly the spirit of these meetings, when you know, some distinguished gentleman or lady is talking about the ICANN's achievements, and then the critical audience bombard them with the questions which actually undermine the legitimacy of any ICANN's decisions. So, speaking about legitimacy, Nigel, I wonder if you remember a very nice, though critical article which was called ICANN and the Problem of Legitimacy, published back in year 2000.
Oh, 2000.
Okay, so it's a very good chance for you, and quite timely, to revisit that. Because, for example, let me just briefly say this. What do you mean by internationalization of ICANN and mission with capitalized M? Just one quick comment. For me, I mean, to me, ICANN is all about addresses and numbers. What kind of mission with capitalized M did you mean in your presentation?
Well, I didn't read the 2000 article, but no doubt you can educate me on it. Yes, well, I think it's reasonably clear. Yes, names and numbers, or you know, whatever. But the fact is that names and numbers do not all originate in Los Angeles. You know, they don't all originate in the Beltway in Washington D.C. or whatever. The next billion users, I know it's trite to say, aren't going to come from those regions, and therefore, if we want to do better in the next round on the generic top-level domains, if we want to have, if the community, if the society or whatever values the domain name system, and I think we're in a fundamental debate here, because if society doesn't value the domain name system, and I know there's articles being written on where you might not need a domain name system in the future, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that Africa has only applied for 18 generic top-level domains. It doesn't matter that Latin America has only applied for 24 or whatever it was. But if it does matter, then we need to make sure that if we have another round of generic top-level domains, and it doesn't matter that it's generic top-level domains, it could be other decisions that take place in terms of the registry accreditation agreement or the WHOIS or whatever, that we understand what other parts of the community want. And that's what globalization is to me. It's not some sort of conquering force. I don't particularly like the word. I mean, if we used it in government, we'd all run away, because it's the sort of word that governments don't like. But I mean, I think in the ICANN sense, It's not about deploying troops in the regions or filling great big offices and things like that. It's coming nearer to where the actual users are, coming nearer to the community, and that's all I can really say on that. And yes, I was let off light, no doubt, on some of these issues, and it'll be interesting to see how developments take place.
Okay, so it's also concerns internationalization. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Hickson.
Thank you.